Hello students, I am here to discuss and give you an insight on the first topic of Civics Class 10, and that is power sharing. But before we discuss this topic at length or delve deeper, the first understanding that has to come is about power. What is power? Well, according to me, power is actually some form of authority, some form of control in the form of instructions and guidelines and do's and don'ts, which a group of people exercise over a major group of people or the entire mass. And coming to the second word of our topic, that is sharing, power has to be shared. Why, in which situation, under what circumstances, that is what we are going to discuss ahead. So children, before we start, there are certain basic terms. This is the synopsis of the entire chapter which I'm showing you on the screen. As you can see, there are certain basic terms like power sharing, just now we discussed. Apart from that, we are going to talk about a little about the population of Belgium and Sri Lanka. Then a new concept called majoritarianism in Sri Lanka. And another concept of accommodation. Something was accommodated in Belgium. What was that? We have to discover. And then we come to answer a question. Only through these particular case studies we answer a question, that is why power sharing is desirable. And finally, how is power shared? So there are various forms, there are various ways through which power can be shared in a democracy. So these are going to be the highlights of our discussion in two different parts. Today we are only going to discuss the case studies of Belgium and Sri Lanka, how majoritarianism was achieved there, and how Belgium accommodated certain problems which they faced. Okay, so to begin with, as I have already told you, power sharing is a particular concept. It's share of authority, it's share of the decision making capacity of a group of people. So that is the first term which we have already got for ourselves today. Moving ahead, there are other terms like ethnic, which actually means relating to a population or a subgroup within a common national or a cultural tradition. So these people have something in common, a common birthplace, a common culture, and a group of people can be referred to as an ethnic population, the original inhabitants, to put it simply. The second term which we will come across is majoritarianism, which means a belief that the majority community should be able to rule a country in whichever way it wants, and it disregards the opinions, the interests, the needs of the minority. So that is a majoritarianism. Civil war is a very simple term. It's a war between the citizens of the same country. When two people, two groups of people, two communities of the same people are at fight, it is a civil war perhaps. Prudential is a smart word which we get, which we just rebrush ourselves with in this particular chapter, and it means to be careful, to avoid any kind of risks and calculate moves. Decide on what the outcomes would be on the basis of certain calculations of what is going to be good and what is going to be bad. The last word which we have here is moral, and moral is just to explain it simply, I believe it's what you ought to do. There are certain actions, certain ways in which a particular human being or a group of people should behave, which is right or wrong behavior, is what we understand by moral. Now moving to Belgium and Sri Lanka, we pick up Belgium first. Now as you can see a map of Belgium, the yellow part is Belgium, my dear children, and it's a small country in Europe which shares its borders with various other countries which you can see in blue, the peach color, the lavender and the orange green, all these colors which are France, Luxembourg, Germany and Netherlands. The economic development benefits of this country reached to Dutch speaking later as compared to French speaking. Economic benefits can mean resources, utilization of developmental resources like training, education, job opportunities and so on. That is what we mean by economic development here. Why is the question, why late to Dutch and why more to French, is the thing that we have to delve deeper. Children, the population comprises of two major linguistic communities in Belgium. One is the Dutch speaking community and the other one is the French speaking community. Alright, in Belgium, the Dutch speaking community is actually a majority. What is the percentage? Can you see on the screen? That is 59% of people speak Dutch, and 40% of people in the whole country of Belgium as a region, they speak which language? French, yes. And the regions which are mentioned in green and blue, so Flemish region means actually the region where most of the speakers are of Dutch origin rather, and Wallonia refers to actually the French speaking region. There is one remaining percentage of population which speaks German. So I will repeat this combination here. Majority is Dutch, which speaks about 59% of people. Then comes the 40% of people who speak French in Belgium, and remaining only 1% of people who speak German language. Alright, this is a combination for the whole country of Belgium. But the second point which I pointed out just now, that is economic development and benefits reached to Dutch speaking later as compared to French. Why? Dutch was in majority. They were more in number. They must have been more powerful. That is the question which comes to my mind, and I'm sure it arises in your mind as well. To explain that further, there is an acute case which happens in Brussels, children. Brussels is the capital of Belgium, and we can again see a pie diagram on our screen now. In Brussels, the entire situation flips over. It just reverses. The community which was in majority in Belgium is in minority in Brussels. See, Dutch speaking people are only 20%. So of the entire population of Brussels, 20% of people speak only Dutch. And the remaining majority, overpowering majority, is the French speaking community, that is 80%. So now, being a capital city, being the hub, being the core of the whole country, there were more benefits, there were more resources and opportunities which helped the French people to grow more as compared to the Dutch people. And now the Dutch would definitely resent this, will not like this, will hate this. Why it will hate? Because it is a majority, it is a major chunk of the population is the Dutch. But they are not getting enough benefits. The forefront is always occupied by the French people. So now there is one more conclusion on our screen which we can read easily. There exists tension between Dutch and French speaking communities. Dutch speaking people constituted a minority in Brussels. The two pigeons there are discussing something which can be later looked upon. Now we come to Sri Lanka. So Belgium, we have understood what was majority in the whole country is minority in the capital city, and thus they are suffering. They did not get enough opportunities for development. Coming to Sri Lanka, children, Sri Lanka is again a small island country off the coast of India, and a few kilometers off the southern coast, basically very close to Tamil Nadu, and it has some Tamil influences as well. Let us discuss the ethnic composition of Sri Lanka. 74% of people in Sri Lanka are speaking a language called Sinhala. So they are called Sinhala speakers, and most of them have a similar religious belief or follow a particular religion, which is Buddhism. So see, 74% obviously seems to be a majority, a major chunk of people of this country speak a language called Sinhala, and side by side they have a particular religion which is Buddhism, which is practiced. So we have a minority language in Sri Lanka, majority language in Sri Lanka, and the majority religion of these people. The same people have a majority religion. The second yellow box here would show you that we have about 18% of Tamil speakers, out of which 13 people are Sri Lankan Tamils. So they are originally of Sri Lanka, and 5% of them are Indian Tamils. There is another smaller group of people, a smaller chunk of people, about 7% of people who are both Sinhala, Tamil, and they also might be following various religions like Hinduism or Christianity or Islam for that matter. But what is more important for our understanding presently is that 74% of people in Sri Lanka speak Sinhalese and follow Buddhism. So there is a majority language spoken and a majority religion practiced by the country. Now, what happened in the year 1948 in Sri Lanka, children? They became free from colonial rule. So they became independent, they established themselves as a democracy. Sri Lanka became an independent country, if I can put it simply. And it adopted majoritarian measures. Majoritarian, just now we have discussed, means certain policies, certain measures adopted by the government totally disregarding, which will not respect, which will not consider the wishes and the needs of the minority. So they adopted certain majoritarian measures to establish Sinhala supremacy. Why Sinhala? Because it's a majority community and it also has a religion followed by that majority of people. So the Sri Lankan Tamils, now what happened to this 18% of the minorities which constituted Sri Lankan Tamils and the Indian Tamils? Out of them, the Sri Lankan Tamils were more proactive, if I can say. They started feeling alienated due to the adoption of the following measures, the various measures which I am going to discuss just now. So there were certain measures which were incorporated, adopted by the Sri Lankan government, the newly formed and newly established Sri Lankan government, which gave more preferences, more importance to the majority of the population. The first one is that in the year 1956, an act was passed which made the Sinhala language the official language of the country. Second one, they started preferential policies. They started preferring the Sinhalese people in matters of university admissions and government job positions and so on. And the third one, the new constitution which was created said that Buddhism becomes the state religion, and the state means the political structure I'm talking about here, shall foster and protect Buddhism. So see what happened here is Tamil as a language, no mention. Other religions, Christianity or Hindu religion or Islamic or any other religion which even a single speck of a person or just a single person might be following or practicing was completely disregarded. So that is why this approach, we call it as majoritarian approach. Coming to further effects, the further repercussions which this majoritarianism had in Sri Lanka was that in Sri Lanka, the Sri Lankan Tamils, they launched a political struggle, agitation. They were disturbed and they wanted to express that disturbances. They formed a political party of their own and wanted to get an official status for their own language, that is Tamil. So they demanded the first thing. Now we have discussed three measures, majoritarian measures, and now we are going to discuss about the demands of the Sri Lankan Tamils. So the first demand they made was that their language should become the official language of the state. Second one, they wanted freedom and equality for all the Tamil speakers. Why freedom? Because they were not being treated in the same way the Sinhalese were being treated. And finally, they wanted to adopt a Tamil state, a Tamil Elam. Elam means a state. So they wanted the creation of a separate, independent, autonomous Tamil Elam. This led to civil war between the two communities, the Sinhalas and the Tamils, which killed thousands of people. It ended in 2009. So long years, imagine from 56, perhaps the minute the constitution was changed or the new constitution was adopted, if I can say, a lot of confusions, a lot of majoritarian measures had negative effects on the whole country, on the political system, on the economy, on the social structure of the country. There was civil war, mass killings of people, and it so affected the overall development of the country. So see here, what we see in the case of Sri Lanka is power was not shared in a desirable way. They of course became independent. They rather chose democracy as a form of government, but a big mistake, a great mistake they did, and that was they adopted majoritarian measures where the majority community's language, their religion, their needs were all considered, whereas the minority was completely disregarded. Now let us see what happened in Belgium. Children, Belgium, see a very positive word we can see on our screen, that is accommodation. It accommodated. We have already discussed a peculiar kind of a problem in Belgium where the majority population in the country, that is Dutch, is minority in the capital. And because of that minority status, it is less developed. It has not received much economic benefits as much as the French community has. So now what they did is between 1970 and 1993, Belgian leaders, they amended their constitution 4 times. So many attempts they made to work out a combination, a particular solution to the existing problem of diversity in their country. The elements, they adopted a particular system which can be easily called a model. What is a model? A model is an ideal. An ideal system, an ideal process is a model. A particular person can be a role model. That's how we use this word model. And that is why we are using this particular accommodation in Belgium as the Belgian model. So first thing they did was that the number of Dutch and the French speaking community, the numbers of these communities, the people who represented in the government should be equal. That is what they decided at the central level. So the first solution they came up with was, no matter what is the percentage of Dutch speakers or French speakers, the number of ministers should be equal in the central government. Thus, no single community can make decisions unilaterally. So no particular community works only for its benefit. Everything is going to be accommodated and negotiated well. Second, the state governments were also not subordinate. A lot of powers of the central government were subordinated to the state governments, and the state governments did not work as subordinates under the clear instructions or guidance of the central government, which was a very positive move. Thirdly, Brussels, which is the capital city of the country and had a peculiar problem, and this, if I can say, the conflicting situation was much more significant, much more immense in Brussels, because the situation was flipped and the French were rich and powerful there and wielding most of the power and enjoying a better economical status and so on. So Brussels had a separate government in which both the communities again had the same number of representation. If there are 10 members from the Dutch speaking community, there are 10 members from the French speaking community as well. And the last one, they adopted or rather innovated, if I can say, a quite impressive solution, is a community government. They came up with an idea called community government, which actually allowed the linguistic groups to work independently. It belonged to the elected representatives of that particular language. So the Dutch people had their own community government, the French people had their own community government, and even the Germans got a place there. The 1% of speaking population, German speaking population, they also had a particular place in regards to the language, in regards to the educational decisions regarding the educational matters or cultural development of the people of that community were to be taken by community government. So now they had four different types of government, if I can say. The first one is the central government with equal representation. The second is the state government, not subordinate, powers transferred, substantial autonomy granted to them. The third comes the special separate government for the Brussels, the capital Brussels. And lastly, we have the community government. And one very significant outcome of this kind of power sharing was that Brussels was chosen as the headquarters of the European Union. Much later, of course, but it became a sorted, politically developed, economically sound, socially adapted country, and thus Brussels, which was already a particular place where a lot of conflicts would have brewed, would have taken a very dirty form, finally became the headquarters of the European Union. Well, children, that much from my side today. I have discussed today, just a short recap, is what is power sharing, some basic terms like ethnic, civil war, majoritarian, and then we discussed the population combination in Sri Lanka and Belgium and how they adopted the power sharing model. How much power they shared, in which way, and what was the result. So on one side we have Sri Lanka with all the negative outcomes, with conflicts, civil war, disintegrating tendencies of the people, of various groups of people, and on the other side we have a very positive a Belgian model, if I can say again, where lots of development occurred economically, politically, socially, and they got an international status, being the headquarters of a major union, the European Union. Thank you, children.